Doug! Did you know that today is National Talk Like Shakespeare Day?
No, what is that even?
Methinks thou art a general offense, and every man should beat thee.
What?
I'd beat thee, but I would infect my hands. Why live easy when you can die hard? Welcome to the Diehards. I'm your host, JJ Wenner, and I am joined by the Oracle himself, Doug Orth, or Orthical.
I'm
workshopping a lot of nicknames for you, buddy. But tonight on the show, we are diving into the 2025 tight end class. Please make sure you do all the good things to support the show. Like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Doug, is there anything that good people should know before we dive into your rankings?
I'm going to establish the ground rules for the fourth and final time this month. Are you ready?
As I will ever be.
JJ, at each position, I score each prospect using a film grade and a prospect grade. Because this is a fantasy show, we will go according to how I think they should be selected in rookie drafts as of right now. Landing spots may alter my thinking, but we'll discuss that down the road. I've used my scoring system over the last 4 drafts. This class contains the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th ranked tight ends in terms of prospect grade over that time. Now, there's some ties in there, but the fact of the matter is this is a good tight end class. So what is prospect grade, you ask?
What is prospect grade?
Thank you, sir.
I ask.
Shakespeare. How would Shakespeare say that?
He would have no idea what a prospect grade is.
Prospect grade at tight end. A player needs to be a realistic threat for 60 catches and 800 receiving yards at some point earlier in their career to be considered a candidate for a perfect grade of 50. Positional scarcity at the pro level is also part of the equation. Now, to give you some idea of what I'm talking about there, I believe I had Brock Bowers last year. He has the highest film grade of any prospect I have graded in these 4 years. And then his prospect grade, I think, was 48 out of 50. So it was, you'll see how much higher I have him than everybody else, but you'll also see how much higher most of the other guys here that we're going to talk about are than the other 3 years too. So anyway, we'll discuss six tight ends tonight. For each one, we'll discuss some basic profile information before summarizing what they bring or don't bring to the NFL.
Okay.
I will wrap up with a high-end and low-end comp, followed by best team fits in the prospect grade. One more time with the shameless plug. You can find my complete write-ups on all the players we are discussing this month on FF Today. Got it, JJ? Good.
I got it, Doug. So, sir, let's start off with your number 1 tight end prospect.
No surprises off the top here. We're going to go with Penn State's Tyler Warren.
Okay.
6'5", 256 pounds, 9.5-inch hands. He'll be 23 at the start of the 2025 NFL season. He was one of the several guys that we'll talk about that didn't participate in the combine or at least test at the combine. So we'll go straight to what my evaluation was of him. As much as a tight end can be an offensive weapon, Warren was that for Penn State in 2024. He was targeted on 32% of Penn State's pass plays last year. His usage was not limited to just catching passes either. He attempted 6 throws and ran 26 times, including several times in short yardage situations. He also lined up in line, in the slot, and out wide. Warren models his game after George Kittle, and it shows. He actually accelerated into contact multiple times. If you want to know what I mean by that, watch the USC, some highlights from the USC game, and it's very rare that you see a guy accelerate into contact, but you talk about delivering the blow, he was wanting to deliver the blow. Anyway, accelerating in contact multiple times, that tends to energize a team when your guy wins that battle, and he does more often than not. To that end, he had 6.7 yards after contact per reception. That ranked 3rd in the country among tight ends with at least 70 targets last year. Then after really struggling with drops as a sophomore and junior, he had a 15+% drop rate in each of those 2 years, 15% drop rate. He lowered that to 2.8 on 135 targets last year. Of the 6 tight ends I observed, I graded him the best in contested catch situations and in body control. While he may not be a blocker, an elite blocker yet, he is probably the most likely tight end prospect, at least of the ones expected to go in the first 2 rounds, to become an elite blocker. There's relatively little to dislike about his game, but he tends to play too high coming off the line of scrimmage as a receiver or blocker. Another area where where he's lacking is explosiveness. On the rare occasion he creates more than a step of separation, it was likely because he was physical. While he can stretch the seam on occasion, and he does, it is unlikely to happen very often because he beat the linebacker or safety in the foot race. As a result, I believe Warren will likely do most of his damage in the NFL in the short and intermediate areas. NFL teams, or fantasy managers for that matter, who are looking for the next Brock Bowers are not going to find him in Warren. But what they should find is a player who should be very good secondary option in the passing game and a red zone standout. My comps for him, this is a little bit of a long one here, but a less athletic George Kittle with shades of Rob Gronkowski in his game. No, I'm not saying he's Kittle or Gronkowski, but you can see where he emulates. You can see where he emulates Kittle, and you can see the occasional shade of Gronkowski. So that's what I think is going to be more likely is his low-end comp, which was Hunter Henry. I think he'll be an advanced Hunter Henry. I don't think he's going to reach the high-end comp there. I do think, because I'll repeat this a time or two during the show, I think this is a Jets podcast, and I think this is probably who the Jets going to take. And I think this is the best team. He's the best fit. So in order, I'm going to go Jets, Chargers, Colts, Bears, Broncos, and Panthers. And I gave him a prospect grade of 41.5, which is second out of the 14 graded tight ends over the last 4 years.
All right, Doug, you brought it up. It is a Jets podcast. I am petrified that the Jets are going to take Tyler Warren. I know that's the way the prognosticators are leaning. My question, because this is also a Penn State pod, after finishing with 10 catches, 34 catches, and then 104 in his final year, why the sudden improvement in production?
Why the sudden improvement in production? Well, I don't have a great answer for that. I can tell you that probably Drew Aller become a better quarterback, but I'm still not. When I say that, I mean, I was not impressed by him. I was not impressed by Aller at all. Of course, I'm not evaluating him per se, but I don't have a great answer for you other than, I'm sorry, I just don't have a great answer for you.
Yeah, see, for me, 32% target share, that's huge. He was stuck behind Theo Johnson. So I'm just a little bit nervous that Tyler Warren, as an older final year player at Penn State, dominated younger competition through an exaggerated target share that I don't know if it's going to carry over to the NFL. But now I am speaking as a Jets fan, and I am petrified of him coming onto my team. You said that Brock Bowers was graded as a 48, and he's a 41.5.
Correct.
And he's going to be going about, what, 8 picks earlier?
Twice, yeah, about at least. I think Bowers was 13, so we're talking 5-6 picks higher. Yeah.
Not today, Satan, is what I would say to that pick. Not today.
I will say, if the other way the Jets could go is offensive line, probably offensive tackle. That Membu, yeah. I think it's going to come down between Membu and Warren. The reason I went with Warren is because he can give you the extra blocking, and because I think he's going to be good in the short intermediate areas. I think that's going to help Justin Fields out or whoever they end up getting down the road. So That's kind of my lean there. But the Jets are going to be a run-heavy team. I don't think there's any question the Jets are going to be a run-heavy team this year. Yeah.
My brother Mace stepping in with the harsh reality of my life as a Jets fan. Mace, they will screw it up. Somehow, they always do. No need to be sorry. Thank you for tuning in, my friend.
You got Darren Muji now, man. Come on. You got the Muji.
Hey, at least they pissed off Aaron Rodgers. Good for them. I'm on their side. All right, sir. Enough about that. Who is your number 2 prospect?
Number 2, and this is sticking with, I mean, I don't really go with consensus, but this is sticking, I think, with consensus. Michigan's Colston Loveland. 6'6", 248, 10-inch hands, and he's going to be 21 at the start of the 2025 season. Again, he was another guy that didn't do anything test at the combine, so we go straight to the evaluation. The term, quote-unquote, oversized receiver sometimes gets overused, but it fits with Loveland. This is a 6'6", 248-pound player who lined up in the slot about half the time and out wide about 19% of the time over his final 2 college seasons. He did not run at the combine, like I said, but he probably would have been clocked in the high 4.5 to low 4.6 range. He's an easy mover, which makes him a weapon on out and slant routes, which is quite uncommon for a tight end. At 6'6", with almost 33-inch arms and a demonstrated vertical explosion, he is the quintessential too big for defensive backs and too fast for linebackers tight end. Unfortunately, though, the term oversized receiver moniker also applies to other parts of his game in a bad way. For a player that's nearly 250 pounds, his run after catch ability is shockingly poor, especially when he is contacted. JJ, you're a teacher. I'm going to pop quiz you. I'm going to pop the quiz here. Would you like to guess how many missed tackles Loveland forced in 2024? Or, and bonus, how many tackles he missed? How many missed tackles he forced over his career?
I will say he forced, what did he have? 82 targets, 56 receptions. I will say 30 missed tackles.
For his career, then?
For his career, 47.
Oh, boy. You're not going to want this guy on the Jets. JJ, you said he had 56 catches, and you're right, in 2024. He only forced 3 missed tackles last year.
Missed it by that much.
That much. Take off a zero. So 3 missed tackles forced on 56 catches last year and 8 missed tackles forced on 117 catches over his 3 seasons. It's amazing when you look at it to see he actually plays like a receiver. But that's what it is. To put that first number in perspective, or either one. Actually, you know what? Let's put the career number. I said 8 missed tackles on 117 catches, right? To put that number into perspective, 8 of the other 12 tight ends who were targeted at least 70 times last year forced at least 8 missed tackles last year alone. Does that make sense? So he did 8 of the 12 did last year what he did over his career. That's what we're talking about here. He was also surprisingly ineffective in contested catch situations in 2024. He was 2 for 10. He put some good downfield blocks on tape, but there's really little evidence at this point of his career that he'll be very helpful at the line of scrimmage in the running game if he has to slow down an edge defender for very long. So bring it full circle, or bring it back here. Assuming the team that drafts him is comfortable with him being a joker as in the passing game. We know that term from Sean Payton in Denver, and that's what they want to do with Evan Ingram. As long as they're comfortable with him being in a joker role and limit his blocking responsibilities to second and third level defenders, I think there's a good chance he becomes the team's number 2 option in the passing game for the better part of the next 8 to 10 years. With that said, he isn't for everyone, but I think a team that sees him as a mismatched weapon will create headaches for defenses. High-end comp for him, and I went high-end here. I think this is another prospect where he's going to be more toward low-end player comp to the high-end, but high-end comp, I went Greg Olsen. Low-end comp, I went with, you remember Zach Miller from about 10 years ago, former Seahawk and Jaguar?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
couldn't ever stay.
ago.
He couldn't ever stay healthy, but he was good when he played. That was my low in comp for him. My best team fits: Chargers. This is in order again: Chargers, Broncos, Colts, and Panthers. My prospect grade for him, and I'm probably going to come down on this, but for right now, it's a 40.5. That's tied for third out of the 14 graded tight ends over the last 4 years.
Wow. Okay, so there's not much difference between him and Warren for you.
Given the right fit. If it's the right fit, we're talking about somebody who's, I'm assuming the right fit. Maybe I shouldn't do that. So I could easily go back after this pod is over and lower that grade, because I'm kind of finding with my prospect grade, I'm giving 40 and above is where I'm going to consider to be an immediate fantasy starter or immediate contributor. And everybody that's below that is kind of, you're going to have more of a, shall we say, much more hit or miss than the 40 and above club. So I could easily see myself lowering that. I think Warren is going to hit. Now, to what degree he's going to hit is another story, but I think the difference between this Loveland's ceiling and floor is considerably more vast than it is for Warren.
All right. I think that answers the question, Doug. I appreciate it. Who is your number 3?
This one, I would not. We'll get into why he could easily move ahead of Loveland, but I'm going with Miami, Florida's Elijah Arroyo. 6'5", 250, 10-inch hands. And he's going to be 22 at the start of the 2025 season. Yet another guy who did not test at the combine. So here we go with the evaluation. Arroyo might be the most athletic tight end in this class, which is saying something. How athletic, you ask?
How athletic?
He led all tight ends who drew more than 45 targets with a 16.9 yards per catch average. Among that same group, he ranked second in FBS and yards after the catch per reception at 8.9. If he had tested, I think he would have probably jumped in the high 30s. 34.3%, basically a little over a third of his catches last year went for 20 yards or more. Again, talking about how athletic this guy is. If you want a perspective on that, that's a number. Let me repeat that. 34.3% of his catches in 2024 went for 20 yards or more. That was more than 10% higher than Brock Bowers in his final season at Georgia. Arroyo only had one drop on 47 targets last year. Now we're talking about somebody who has an 82.25-inch wingspan. I thought that would probably be top of the class. That's not really. There's several guys that have a more significant wingspan, but 82.25 inches is still. That's what we're talking, almost 7 feet. So brings a monster catch radius to the table. Considering how relatively little he played, he has also proven to be a capable and willing blocker, although that's not exactly a strong suit right now. He's also one of the few tight end prospects who create separation easily with just his speed and has enough flexibility, lower body flexibility, to change directions without needing to gear down much. Now, as far as why we should be a little bit down on him, a bet on Arroyo is a bet on a player who lost parts of 2 seasons due to an ACL tear and amassed only 46 catches over 4 seasons. Now, JJ, does one season in which he averaged nearly 17 yards per catch and a touchdown every 5 receptions make up for that? Does that make him a tight end who may just be scratching the surface in terms of it? Does that make him a tight end who may just be scratching the surface of his talent, or does that make him an injury risk? At this point of his career, he's more of an athlete than a technician and needs to prove he can handle physical coverage, which he did not see much lining up over in the slot over half the time. When he wasn't in the slot, Miami would slide him out into the opposite flat, basically using the entire offensive line as a screen, as another way to get him to avoid getting contacted off the line of scrimmage. So bottom line, while he comes with obvious risk, the combination of injury concerns and the small chance he was a one-hit wonder may be the only reasons why he's not being considered a first-round pick. With that said, it should surprise no one if he has the best career of the bunch, and I'm talking of everybody we're talking about today. He has the tools to make it happen. My high and low end comps for him, I struggled with this one more than most, but I'm going high end comp. I went with Jared Cook. Yes. And low end, somebody I was never high on, and he's proven me right so far, and that's Luke Musgrave. Of course, the reason he hasn't proved it is because he's always hurt, and I think that makes him a great comparison for Arroyo. Once again, you're going to hear the Chargers a lot for team fits, but my best team fits in order: Chargers, Broncos, Bengals, Falcons, and Colts. And I gave him a 40 on the prospect grade. That's tied for 5th among the 14 tight ends I've graded over the last 4 years.
So my biggest question, and it's something that you had asked, is there enough in 2024 in his tape that's going to make him not be Chumbawamba, right? Like, not the one-hit wonder, right, said Fred, all of those great ones. Or is he just going to be an injury risk? Now, my question to you is, he's this athletic freak. He's very athletic. He has this giant catch radius, but he had one contested catch last year. One. Now, he's a deep target, right? 4th most deep yards, 4th most deep receptions. But is that a concern? Did he just out-athlete everybody in college, or is he polished enough to succeed?
This is one guy I did not look at in terms of did you happen to see how many contested catch opportunities he had versus he had the one catch? Did you happen to see how many targets he had in those situations?
I did not.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to work tub thumping, and I'm too sexy into this answer, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to.
Well, I hope you do get back up again, or at least have a whiskey drink.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I will have a whiskey drink. I think that's more of a matter of circumstance. I think you hit on it. As far as out athleting, I hate bad English, but out athleting players, I think that was a significant part of his success last year.
It is not bad English, by the way. We are simply coining a new term, which is something that Shakespeare did all the time, my friend.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No,
Sorry.
I have nothing for that. I have nothing for them. So, yeah, part of it was circumstance too. You have Xavier Restrepo, right? And so Cam Ward had plenty of opportunities when he wanted to go short. He had Restrepo to throw short to. That's not to say that our guy here was intermediate and deep catch guy only, but yeah, I don't think there was a lot of contested catch opportunities for him. 1 out of 5.
1 for 5.
Okay, that one I would chalk up to small sample size, and he could afford to get a little bit stronger throughout his body. And sometimes when you have bad contested catch numbers, it's just a matter of not being strong enough. But there again, I think that's where him being the athlete he is, it will eventually. It may not work out itself out in the first year, but I think in year 2, year 3, and beyond, you're going to start seeing somebody who just. You see shades of Jimmy Graham, for example. I hate to just throw those names out there, but you do see shades of that. And so, yeah, I could see where it evolves into something more, where that ends up being a strength for him.
Well said, Doug, which isn't the same as right said Fred. But trying to bring it together. Thank you. That was awesome. And if you like what Doug had to say, don't forget to follow us on X at FF Diehards. Follow Full Time at Full Time Fantasy. All right, sir. Who is your number 4?
Yeah, LSU's Mason Taylor. I thought for sure so much of this draft class, before I evaluated them, I thought I knew how I was going to rank them. And I was for sure I was going to put Mason Taylor number 2. And then you watch and your opinion changes. And I'm sure if I went through and watched them again, a lot of these guys that we've talked about, I would change the order slightly, but I would still change the order. Anyway, LSU's Mason Taylor, 6'5", 251. Again, 10-inch hands. We'd like to see that in all our pass catchers. He's going to be 21 at the start of the 2025 season. So, and that is a not insignificant part of his evaluation is the fact that he's one of the younger guys and one of the younger tight end prospects in the draft. We know most of us know he's the son of NFL sackmaster and former New York Jet, 1 year, Jason Taylor. I try to work in this. This is a Jets podcast.
I appreciate you.
Yeah,
I appreciate you.
So anyway, Mason Taylor is the only tight end in school history to record 100-plus catches and 1,000-plus receiving yards over the course of his college career. Not including his near prototypical size for a tight end, perhaps Taylor's best quality are his hands. He only had 1 drop on 55 catches and 79 targets last year. He may be a bit stiff as a runner considering his bloodline, but that doesn't mean he lacks in fluidity or athleticism. Taylor makes himself a friendly target for his quarterback by making himself available quickly, being able to catch balls easily outside of his frame, and showing little fear in traffic. As I mentioned about the age, he's the second youngest tight end prospect in this class, and he will not turn 21 until next month. It is possible he hasn't fully maxed out in terms of his height and weight yet. For the most part, he is more of a chain mover with some build-up speed right now than a player who will stretch the seam consistently. He is surprisingly poor after the catch, 4.6 yards this past year and 5.4 for his career. He has the athleticism to create more separation than he does, but he does not do a good job at this point of using his size right now to wall off defenders. We're talking like a hitch route or whatever, where he could just kind of box out. If you hear about the term about boxing out defenders, he doesn't do a good enough job of that right now. This means he will probably score most of his early wins against linebackers and not safeties. At least for now, he's more of a downfield perimeter blocker than someone who should be asked to handle an edge defender one-on-one on the line. Now, maybe I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt considering how athletic his dad was and his age, but Taylor seems like a likely candidate to add about 10 pounds in the next year and become something of a Kyle Rudolph, Jason Witten clone down the road. Probably more Kyle Rudolph than Jason Witten, but you get my point. He could become a high-volume weapon at some point early in his career, but I fear he will always be more of a move-the-chains guy than with some red zone upside than an all-purpose standout. To that end, my high-end comp form was Hunter Henry. My low-end comp form was Logan Thomas. My best team fits for him: the Jaguars, the Broncos, Chargers, Colts, Jets, and Panthers. I gave him a 39 on the prospect grade, which is tied for 7th out of the 14 graded tight ends over the last 4 years.
Don't forget his uncle is also Zach Thomas.
Yes.
So, but man, 6'5", 255. It'd be interesting to see him lined up as a defensive end like his dad. But yeah, I guess my biggest question, is he physical enough to be a premier tight end?
At this point, no. But again, we're talking about a 20-year-old who I think I would not be shocked if he ends up being 265, 270 before long. And I don't think there's any question in my mind that he will become physical at some point. He's just not there right now.
But do you think if he gets up to 265, 270, he'll still be the receiving threat we want him to be? Or
well, yeah, the hands, I don't think the hands are going to change, but okay. I think you're talking about somebody, I threw Jason Witten out there. Jason Witten, toward the end of his career, he may have been lighter than 260, but he moved around like he was 270, but he was just a technician, somebody who understood the value of footwork. And even when he was in his final years, Witten understood how to get open. And I think I think this is just one of those things where you would like to think, given how long he's been around NFL dad, NFL uncle, that you just assume at some point that these guys are going to have this knowledge, but there's a lot to learn at every position. And so when it becomes his full-time job, then I think it's something you're going to see a little bit more of.
All right. Well, sir, let's get to your number 5 tight end.
Yeah, and I wanted to say before, like I said, this is number 5 here. Each of these 3 guys, this guy and then the previous 2, if it's going to be kind of a pick your flavor. And I'll say this with Loveland to a degree, if he finds a bad landing spot, I have no problem moving him down to 4 or 5 in this class. And like the guy we're just going to talk about now, if he finds a sweet landing spot, I have no problem moving him up to 2. But let's erase the mystery here. So Bowling Green's Harold Fannin Jr. is my number 5. 6'3", 241. Although I think he actually plays a lot lighter than that, or he probably played at about a 230, but we'll get into that. 9.25-inch hands, and he's going to be 21 at the start of the 2025 season. He is the one guy of the 6 we'll talk about who actually tested out pretty much everything. So I'll just give you everything, including the percentiles here. He ran a 4.71, 65th percentile. 34-inch vertical, 61st percentile. Broad jump 9.10, 67th percentile. 20-yard shuttle was about average, 4.39, and that's a 47th percentile. And then 3-cone was 6.97. That was in the 82nd percentile. So as far as the evaluation is concerned, the term movable chest piece typically gets used at receiver nowadays. But if it was ever to apply to a tight end, Fannin might be the poster boy for that. He lined out out wide or in the slot on almost 60% of his snaps in 2024. He also lined up as a wing or fullback. He was even featured on jet sweeps. If versatility, the aforementioned versatility I was just saying, isn't his superpower, then his ability to do work after the catch might be. Okay, buckle down. This is something you're going to take notes on here. Despite setting FBS single season records for catches and receiving yards for a tight end last year, his most stunning feat might have been accumulating more yards after the catch. That was 873 yards after the catch. He accumulated more yards after the catch than all but 2 other tight ends in college football had receiving yards. So it's almost the Ashton Genty of, Ashton Genty had 1,900 yards after contact, and that was more than that's kind of what Fannin was doing at tight end. So you're gonna say, okay, that's the MAC conference. Okay, he did this against. He had 80 yards after the catch against Penn State and against Texas A&M too. He got most of it. He got most of his yards against MAC competition or lower, but he showed up in those games too. This was not just simply he played everybody that was ranked 80th or worse in defense. Fannin was only charged with 1 drop on 111 targets through 11 games before he, as I said here, things got a little weird at the end. He had 3 drops in his final 2 games, but he was also targeted like 40 times over those last 2 games. That was pretty incredible. He added some muscle for the combine that probably hurt his stock because I think he's probably more of a 4.6 runner, which would have, it doesn't sound like much of a difference. 4.7, he tested 4.7. He probably would have been 4.6, but 4.7 at 230, 4.7 at 241 makes it worse than it sounds a lot worse than 4.6 at 230. Anyway. Also working in his favor is the fact he's the youngest tight end prospect in this draft, and he won't turn 21 until training camp. So why did he find himself so low in my rankings? Well, pretty simple, actually. He may not have a position. He's too small to be an inline tight end at 230 or even 240. He doesn't block well enough at this point to be a fullback, and he's not quick enough and probably not fast enough to be a primary slot. To what degree a play caller is willing to work around having a second tight end who likely needs to be scheme touches will likely determine his fate. If the play caller is adamant about getting Fannin matched up on linebackers, guy could easily become a fantasy star. If not, he could easily join Colston Loveland as players we've discussed that could be discarded quickly by a new regime intent on playing more traditional football. My comps for him, and these should not come as a surprise, and it should tell you about what I think what he could become. But high end comp, a stepper version of Jonnu Smith. A low end comp, Isaiah Likely. So I think his ceiling and his floor are pretty close to each other. My
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I've been talking a lot. Sorry. My best team fits: Chargers, Jaguars, Dolphins, Bears, and Seahawks, and gave him a 39 prospect grade, tied for 7th out of the 14 graded tight ends.
I would be much happier if the Jets got Fannin later than Warren early. The number that jumped off most for me for Fannin was the 34 missed tackles forced.
Yeah.
I like that. But, I do question his ability to translate from Bowling Green to the NFL. But I'm also looking forward to see what happens to him training in an NFL facility.
Yeah.
There is a massive difference for somebody coming from, the Penn State tight ends are historically athletic whenever they come out for the combine. And I wonder how well that translates down to the lower divisions. So for your 3 through 5,
yes,
you said that they're close, they're interchangeable depending upon landing spot. Is this order, Arroyo, Taylor, Fannin, like best case scenario for all of them? This is where you would rank them? Or does that question make sense? Like if they each landed in an ideal scenario?
If they each land in an ideal scenario, then I would say to a degree that's kind of how I get assigned the prospect grade, at least with these guys. But yeah, if to me you could shake up 2 through 5 here. If Loveland gets Loveland gets stuck with a for whatever reason gets stuck with a old school offense coordinator
who wants to make him in line.
Yep.
Toughen up, add 20 pounds.
Yep. Yeah. He's coming down. He's coming down big time. If Fannin ends up in I won't say Baltimore, but you see what Isaiah Likely has done. You see what Jonnu Smith has done. Teams that are willing to be a little bit think outside the box with him, then I don't know. I don't want to put him at 2 at any point, but I think that's a definite possibility. Okay. Arroyo stays healthy, he's moving up to 2. That type of stuff. And I want to say one other thing. And you brought up a good point about the missed forced tackles, right? 34, 33 or 34, right? 34.
34.
Okay. One thing I'd like to say is not all missed forced tackles are created equal. Meaning, I think people will just look at that number and say, okay, that's a nice number. Well, it's what you do to put yourself in position to force that missed tackle, right? If you understand angles well enough, sometimes you just overpower the guy. Other times you just understand angles better than the other guy, and you can sidestep him. Just a little move here means you don't get hit, or you get an ankle tackle attempt. And so it says a lot about any player, and especially a tight end, because Fannin was considerably higher than the rest of the group in missed forced tackles, I believe, if I recall. So some of that is opportunity, but some of that, man, is just being able to put yourself in a position where you don't get hit. So that's a skill in and of itself.
All right, sir. Speaking of skill, let's talk about your number 6 prospect.
Wow. Yeah. This will probably be the only one that we talk about that won't go in the first 2 rounds, or it's very unlikely to go in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. Oregon's Terrance Ferguson, 6'5", 247, 9.25-inch hands, and he'll be 22 at the start of the 2025 season. Now, unlike our guy Harold Fannin, he tested out. He actually dominated the combine, if one can dominate the combine. He ran a 4.63 in the 40. That's 83rd percentile. A 39-inch vertical. That's 96th percentile. And a broad jump of 10 to 86th percentile. So all of his testing numbers were at 83 or above percentile. Now, Ferguson may be the best example of how much better Bo Nix is as a quarterback at this stage of his career than Dillon Gabriel. And that's not a knock on Dillon Gabriel so much as it is just a realization that Bo Nix was actually pretty good. Watching Ferguson's 2023 film revealed a player who caught virtually everything thrown in his direction and broke a ton of tackles. And we'll get to that in a bit. Following the departures of Troy Franklin and Bucky Irving to the NFL, Oregon asked Ferguson to work downfield more often this year. The result was 25, so basically a quarter of his catches going for 20 yards or more this past year. As his combine numbers would suggest, he's more than athletic enough to be a contested catch option, although that was a shortcoming of his game during his college career as a whole. He only came down with 36% of his contested catch opportunities. Now, I personally think that was more of a function of the conservative nature of his quarterbacks. Again, we're talking Bo Nix and Dillon Gabriel. We're not talking about gunslingers. We're talking about guys who rely heavily on accuracy. They're probably not going to put the ball in harm's way, so you wouldn't expect them to be great contested catch throwers, if that makes sense. So, but either way, I think Ferguson could stand to attack the ball better in the air, and I think that's part of the reason why he was at 36% on the contested catch rate. Now, I was generally pleased with his willingness and capacity to block relative to the rest of the tight ends we've discussed, but there's improvement, as there is with most tight ends. There's room for improvement for him there, especially as a blocker in space. As a whole, he seemed to backtrack a little bit last year from his breakout season as a junior, and I was talking about the missed forced tackles. He had 13 missed forced tackles in 2023, and that was nearly half of his career total. His drop rate was 4.5 in 2023, and that's half of what it was last year. So tell me, is that Gabriel? Is that the transition from Nix to Gabriel? I don't know. One of the few things that did improve considerably last year was his ability to produce after the catch. He had a 9 yards after catch. That was the best in the country by a tight end with at least 30 targets. Now, you'd think he's a bull in a china shop. He's not exactly a bull in a china shop with the ball in his hand, but he doesn't shy away from contact either. Whereas I think the rest of the aforementioned tight ends can make a case to be considered a top 3 option in this class because they have at least one thing they do well. Ferguson will probably make his living as an inline tight end who works mostly in the short area of the field once he gets a little bit stronger. My comps for him, and these felt rushed, but my high-end comp for him was Jake Ferguson, and my low-end comp for him was Noah Gray. And I went, you were talking about, again, Jets podcast, my best team fits, Jets, Falcons, Colts, and Chargers. Game 37 prospect grade, and that's tied for 11th out of the 14 graded tight ends. Before I turn it back to you, I would say, while that sounds bad, let's keep in mind I've only evaluated 14 tight ends over the last 4 years because there hasn't been a lot of tight ends. This is easily, I evaluated 6 tight ends this year. That means I've evaluated 8 over the previous 3 years. That tells you that this class is pretty good. So don't look at the prospect grade, or don't think of the 11th out of 14 tight ends and say, oh, this is a bum of a tight end prospect. He's a good tight end prospect who we might be using in fantasy a couple years down the road.
Now, my biggest concern for him, his lateral agility,
Fair,
isn't very good, and it kind of showed up both in his receiving and also his blocking. So my biggest concern is that Does he have enough athleticism to buy himself time to improve? Is he going to be able to perform at a level where NFL coaches will give him chance after chance after chance to get better?
That's usually a luxury only afforded to first-round picks. But does he have the athleticism to do it? Absolutely. I actually love his tenacity. I know you'll hear some people that say, I think I heard Lance Zierlein say an alarming lack of tenacity. Like, this guy gets after it more than any of the others. Six, all the 6 tight ends that I've watched, he gets after it as much as anybody does. So, the willingness is definitely there. I think he's athletic enough to do it. Now you're asking if he's going to be afforded the opportunity to get himself to where he needs to be. And as probably like a 3rd-round pick, if he doesn't have it mostly figured out in the first 2 years, he's probably not rebounding from that. I think we'll be using him in fantasy down the road, but we know how quickly these coaching staffs turn over too. So,
yeah. I also didn't like the fact that he wasn't really used as a deep target. Kind of want to see that, especially with the big frame, but you never know what happens.
One other thing we talk about athleticism, or you and I haven't talked about it so much, but athleticism being as important at tight end as any quality. So he does have that. Let's be clear. I mean, I ran through the combine measurables there. He does have the athleticism, but everything that you and I have said here, I think does provide make him more of a 50-50 type of a prospect, as opposed to he's going to be in the league for 5+ years.
Well, if you're looking for guys who are going to be in the league for 5+ years, Diehards, Dynasty leagues are without a doubt the fastest growing segment in all of fantasy sports, and the Dynasty Football World Championships, now in their 13th season, are underway. So adopt an orphan to take part in an upcoming rookie draft, which are going to start 1 week after the actual NFL draft, or jump into a new startup and draft your own team from the beginning. Either way, you're going to be on your way to becoming the next Dynasty King. Draft start at just $75 with $150, $299, and if you're Doug Orth, higher options available. So head to dynastyking.com and look for the Dynasty Football World Championships. Now, Doug,
JJ, I'm only interested. I'm only interested on $300 and above. So talk to me about those higher amounts.
Wow. You are definitely a high roller, my friend. But I tell you what, Doug, today is the best day of the year for me. It's draft eve. It's the day when every team is going to make the best picks possible. Every team is going to turn their fortunes around. There's no harsh realities. There's no disappointment. There's nothing that makes you think I am a Jet fan. So on this greatest of all days, let's talk about some draft prop bets. Let's start with the QBs, sir. Now, currently, the line for the number of QBs drafted in the first round is 2.5. Are you going over or under 2.5 quarterbacks in the first round?
JJ, I'm going over. And this is of the ones that we're going to talk about here, this is the one I feel the best about. Cam Ward goes 1. We're not surprised by this, right?
Yep. New
Orleans at 9 makes sense for another quarterback, but I don't think they go in that direction. If they did, I think they would probably lean toward Jackson Dart. But anyway, the Steelers at 21 will almost certainly grab one. And so, because they don't have a second rounder. I think the Rams are a wild card. I don't think they will. But so what I've identified so far is Cam Ward at 1, and most likely the Steelers going with another one. So that's 2. What I do expect to happen is either the Giants or Browns or if not both, will want to jump into the first round to get the quarterback they can control up to 5 years. Both teams want and need a young quarterback to develop. So I can see a scenario in which 4 quarterbacks go in the first round. I think it will probably be 3. If the 4th one goes, it's going to be Jalen Milroe. But my point being is I don't see Jackson Dart. They talk about Sanders dropping out of the first round. I don't see that happening. And there's too much smoke around the Jackson Dart fire to make me think that he's going to slip out of the first round. So I feel good about 3.
All right. I am also going the over. I think there's going to be 3. I don't know about 4. And I don't know if the 4th would be Tyler Shuck or Jalen Milroe. It's going to be interesting to see. I've heard Tyler's name mentioned a lot, but we'll see what happens. Now, Shedeur Sanders drafts like over under for his draft slot is 10.5. Are you going over or under? Is he going to go before pick 10.5 or after pick 10.5?
I'm going to go over, meaning I think he's going to go after pick 10.
Later in the draft.
Yes. To me, the bet here is whether Sanders goes at 9 or some team trades into the top 10. I don't see him going to the Browns or Giants ahead of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, nor do I see the Raiders taking him at 6. So I think if he's going to go in the top 10, it would be 9 or 10, and I think the Bears at 10 would be trading up. I don't think the Saints are taking him at 9. So I feel good enough about this over that if you could goose the odds a little bit and go top 16, I don't think he's going top 16 either. So if you want to bet on Sanders in the back half of the first round, I would take that bet.
All right. Jackson Dart's line is 21.5.
This one, I believe, is an under, so I think he will go in the top 21. There are only 2 spots I see Dart landing inside the top 21, which make you think, well, why are you going under here? I see New Orleans and Pittsburgh being those 2 teams. Fortunately, I think both teams would be thrilled to get him. I think there's a distinct possibility that Denver's pick at 20 will be the target for teams like the Giants and the Browns, like I just mentioned, to trade up and grab either Sanders or Dart. In other words, it would not surprise me if Sanders and Dart went with back-to-back picks at 20 and 21. So I think that's probably going to be more of the sweet spot for both of those guys is in the 16 to 21 range.
All right. I have to agree with you with Jackson Dart. I think he goes before pick 21 or earlier. Let's move over to the running backs. Tons of talent in this draft. Everybody says it's such a deep draft for running back. But the over-under for the first round is 2.5. Do you think more or less than 2.5 running backs will go in the first round?
Well, I told you with quarterbacks, that was the one I felt the best about, right?
Okay.
This is the question I feel the answer I have the least confidence in, because it boils down to whether or not we think some team is going to, at the back end of the first round, is going to go get Travion Henderson. Because we can assume Genty's probably going to go top 6. We can probably assume that Omari and Hampton's going to go, I think he'd go in the top 15, but I think top 20 is fair. I don't think there's any question he's going in the first round, though. At the end of the day, I think some team, likely the Commanders or the Chargers, will value what Travion Henderson brings to the table as far as a passing game weapon, that they'll probably get him, in the 20. I think the Chargers pick at 22 and the Commanders pick at 28, something like that. I think one of those 2 teams will value him enough to make the selection there. So I'm going to go with the over on 2.5 running backs.
Now I'm going to go with the under on this one. I think it's going to be 2. I think it is going to be Hampton. I think it is going to, of course, be Genty. Hampton's line is pick 19.5. It just moved from 20.5. Do you think he's going to go before pick 20.5 or after?
Wonder why it moved. Denver picks at 20, and I think that's the easy. That's the there's no such thing as a stone cold lock, But so especially if Denver wants to trade up, you hear some things about Denver wanting to trade up and being, whether that's for Ted McMillan or Genty or whatever. But I think if they stick and pick, that's going to be their pick is Omari and Hampton. So pick 20 is, I think, where Hampton ends up.
I think that's pretty fair, sir. Let's go over to wide receivers. We have a similarity here. 2.5 wide receivers going in the first round.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with the over with I hate to be the all over guy here. But first of all, I think this assumes that Travis Hunter is going to be listed as cornerback, right? I think that's what we're doing. If we assume he's a cornerback, then this makes it a lot more tricky. I'm still going to go with the over.
It's a good question. Let's say Travis Hunter is a cornerback first.
So if he is a corner, then the question then becomes, do we think Emeka Egbuka is going to go in the first round? Because again, we're talking about Ted McMillan's going in the first round. Matthew Golden's probably going to go in the first round. So now we're figuring out whether it's going to be a Egbuka. I don't see any other receiver being a legit first round pick there. So I think ultimately what's going to happen is Egbuka. I think the Texans are going to be most attracted to Emeka Egbuka, if not for the CJ Stroud connection, just because they could use a receiver, a pro-ready receiver. And so either way, I'm going to go over. But if Travis Hunter is listed as a receiver then I'm going to go way over.
All right, I agree with you. I'm taking the over on the 2.5. Regardless of whether or not Travis Hunter is considered a wide receiver. The last year, we had 14 straight offensive players to start the draft and 23 overall in the first round. The line this year is 15.5 total offensive players. That includes an offensive line. Are you going over or under 15 offensive players?
Yeah, this one will be pushing it. I am going to go with the slight over, and for the reasons that we've already kind of discussed here over the last few minutes. I have 3 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, and 3 receivers going in the first round, and I think the three of the 6 tight ends that we discussed could easily go in the first round, even if we say 2. Loveland and Warren, I think, are our first round locks. Mason Taylor may or may not be. I've heard plenty of talk. I've seen plenty of talk about that, but let's just assume that he doesn't. So either way, that means depending on what we think about Mason Taylor, that means we only have 3 or 4 offensive linemen that we need to add to that mix. I think 4 offensive linemen are going to go, and more than likely 5. I think 3 offensive linemen are going to go in the top 10. So that's going to be Armand Membu, Will Campbell, and Kelvin Banks. So I think they're going to hit their requirement pretty quickly. After that, I think Josh Simmons from Ohio State and Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, I think those guys will go in the back end of the first round. So that'll give us 5 offensive linemen to go. So we got 5 linemen, 2 tight ends for sure. And then I said 3 for the rest of each of the other fantasy positions.
16.
So I feel I'm going to go with the slide over there.
I'm going to go the over as well. I think up to 6 offensive linemen can go in the first. Add Jackson and Booker to that. Jackson bumping in from tackle to guard.
Donovan Jackson, yeah.
And then, Booker, I think, might go. But I'm also going to go with the over. I think we're going to have about 16 or 17 total go. But we shall see. Doug,
yes,
that
sir.
means it is time to say goodbye. Let people know where they can find us and any final thoughts you may have.
Putting my final touches on the draft profiles that I mentioned at FF today. Colston Loveland will go up tomorrow. My best of the rest will go up tomorrow. Basically, everybody that we've covered over these last 4 episodes now will be highlighted in written form. So I think I ended up doing 36 36 evaluations. So you will see all of those in some way, shape, or form on the FF Today site. So that's, and then I'm just going to get a good night's sleep. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go watch a couple more prospects tonight. I'm going to get around to watching Damian Martinez and Taj Brooks and see what I think of them. But outside of that, that's what I got going on. You want to take us home, JJ?
I'm at JJ Wenner on the socials. You can follow the pod at FF Diehards on X. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Make sure you're following Doug, as loquacious as he is on the podcast. He is gifted with the quill. So make sure you're checking out his full profiles over at FF Today. Make sure you're following Full-Time Fantasy on X at Full-Time Fantasy. Stay tuned for exciting updates about the FFWC. We are going to be back next Thursday, Doug, at 8 p.m. to complete our first rookie mock draft with our guests, Jody Smith, Joe Harlow, and Jameson Hutchinson. Lots of J's. So until then, be safe, be well, and as always, boat drinks, my friends, boat drinks.